I'm Mo. In 2023, I am bringing back a video series that I used to do, which was my Readathon Recap. So after I talked about the books in my reading wrap-up, I would also do a brief video about the readathons that I participated in that month, what books fit them, if they fit the prompts. It was more for me than it was for my audience, just to keep as a reminder of all the books that I read, all the prompts, everything, and how it fit together. In 2022, I stopped doing that and I started doing quarterly Readathon recaps, but I quickly fell off with that. I would put it off and then never actually make the video. It just fell by the wayside. I would like to go back to doing monthly recaps, and this one is going to be the first one. Since it's January and I haven't finished any of my January books yet, I want to go back to November and December of 2022. I can't go through all the months of 2022. It's been far too long and I can't remember or don't want to dig up all that information, but I can pretty well remember November and December, so I will be talking about that. Before we get started on those months, however, I wanted to go ahead and talk about some readathons and challenges, monthly reading themes, and other aspects of my recaps that you might see over the coming year, and I wanted to just go through monthly and talk about a little bit about what goes on each month. This is not an exhaustive list of the readathons that are around, but these are ones that I have either consistently done, want to do, or if they're not an outside force, maybe there's something that I just do on my own. Starting in January, I always look at my DNFs for the previous year or even previous to that if I still have them, and I like to finish at least one DNF in January, finish a book that was on my DNF shelf. I also recently found out that January is Japan in January, where we try to read Japanese books and Japanese authors. I didn't get a chance to participate in that this year, but that's something that I look forward to in years to come. February is Black History Month in the US, and it is a time to celebrate Black history and Black bodies and Black love. February is not the only time we should be celebrating that. We should be celebrating it all the time, but I do make a concentrated effort to read as many Black authors and Black stories as I can during the month of February. March is March Mystery Madness. This is one of my favorite mystery thriller readathons. It comes around every March. The themes and prompts are always different, but even if you just read mysteries that month, you're on top of it. March for me is also my TBR month, so that's the month that I always do like a TBR tag. I go through my current TBR, I take off books that I don't think I'm going to want to read, organize, and I usually do a video showing my full TBR. April is Aussie April, so this is a time to celebrate and read Australian works. It is also National Poetry Month in the US, so I definitely try to read quite a bit of poetry. I think I'm in my poetry year right now, so I'm hoping to definitely have a lot of poetry to read. I also love April because it is NYRB April. NYRB stands for New York Review Books. These are the cute little editions from the NYRB collection, which mainly features forgotten classics or works by modern writers that they think have been overlooked. I almost always love these books. There's been very few that I have disliked just because they're so well and thoughtfully curated. So in April, we try to read as many NYRB books, or at least a NYRB book that we have. May is Horror Mayhem. I participated this first in 2022, and it is a book to read short horror works. Last year it was broken down to weeks, so each week had a theme, and then during that week you read a book or as many books as you wanted with that theme. I'm very excited for that again this year. June is Pride Month in the US, so I try to read as many queer books as I can and celebrate queer authors and queer writing and queer stories. And it's also June on the Range. June on the Range is for reading westerns, and this can be modern or contemporary westerns or classics. I've participated for the first time in 2022, and I definitely hope to do so again. July is Plastic Free July all around the world, and it's a time to think about the use of plastic and how we can change that, how we can better our planet and live more sustainably and plastic free. And I think this is a really great time to read sustainability books as well. I've seen, I think her name is Faith and Books, did this project last year to read sustainability books, nonfiction on sustainability, on plastic and its devastating effects on our planet, but also fiction surrounding climate change and climate fiction. So I would definitely like to participate in that this year. Between June and August is also the time that I set my summer TBR. You know, I don't really do TBRs, but I try to pick 10 to 20 books that I've been wanting to read that I think are ideal for reading in the summertime or that I want to get read over the summer. So I pick those books and then I usually also look back at my previous TBRs and see what I've completed. August is Women in Translation Month. This is a great time to read women translators, translated work by women, and celebrate books in translation, whether you are an English speaker and are reading books that are translated into English, or you are a non-English speaker and you're reading books translated into your own language. They have to be written by women, though, to count, and it also helps if there's also a woman translator. It's also Garb August, which is a readathon that Criminali started last year, where you read trashy books. I will link below to his Garb August video where he describes what a trashy book is. September is Sci-Fi September and Space Opera September. I like any readathon that helps me read more sci-fi. Last year I did prompts for Sci-Fi September because there weren't any, and these can be used every year because they're pretty open prompts, so I will put that video down below as well. I love that Sci-Fi September is basically any kind of sci-fi, but space opera is specifically sci-fi set in space. It's also Shorty September, so in my mind, a short book is a book between 175 pages and 250 pages. So Shorty September is a time to read as many of these lengths of books as you possibly can. And we'll talk about the shorter books in a couple of months. For October, most of the bookish community reads spooky books. I like to read spooky books all year long, but it also is a time when spooky readathons come along. I know there's a bunch of them, but one of the readathons that happens several times during the year, but usually at least once in October, is Gabby Reads and Olivia Reads a Latte Winterween, Spring Flingaween, Weekendween, Halloween readathons. These are times to read horror and thriller books, spooky books, and they, like I said, have them all through the year. They usually have a winterween, they usually have a springween, and then they usually have a couple of other weekends or other weeks during the year that they do them, and generally one is in October. November is when we're going to talk about those really short books, and that is for Novella November. These are books 175 pages and below, so we try to read as many of those as we can in November. It's also nonfiction November, so a great time to read nonfiction, whether it be long or short. The Bloomin' Readathon happens in November. This is put on by Allison Pages, and it's a time to just enjoy and rejoice in reading, a time when part of the world is kind of closing down for winter and part of the world is kind of coming awake for spring. So whatever side you're on, you get to join in the perennial joy of reading. And finally, November, well, not finally, there's lots and lots of readathons that happen in all these months. Like I said, this is not a comprehensive list, but one of the other readathons that I participate in November is Skoden, used to be called Indigathon, and this is a time to read Indigenous authors, specifically authors writing from an Indigenous perspective and about Indigenous stories from the US and Canada, but this can also be Indigenous works from other countries as well. In December, we have a confluence of mystery events. We have the Christie's Missing Readathon, which takes place during the time that Christie was missing and no one could find her. This is a time to read Agatha Christie books, but also time to read mysteries in general. We also have Cloak and Dagger Christmas, which is another great month-long readathon to read as many mysteries as you can. Last year, I also tried to finish the Buzzword Readathon in December, and it might be something that I try again this year. The Buzzword Readathon Challenge is a challenge that Books and Lala puts on every year, and each month of the year she sets a buzzword and you have to read a book with that word in the title. And it can be done month to month, January for January, February for February, or you can just try to read as many of those as you can through the year. Or, like I did, you can look back and see if you did read them, and if you didn't finish one of the prompts, go ahead and finish it in December. Another year-long set of prompts to think about this year is the Savage prompts put on by Simon Savage and his mom Louise. These are 13 prompts that they picked out of a hat that were submitted by followers, and each month there's a different prompt. I'm trying to complete these in 2023 as well. Another great year-long but divided by month readathon this year is the TBR spin. We used to have TBR tackle and the booktube spin, but sadly those are both gone. Friends of the original creators have picked up the mantle and created the TBR spin. So each month the Book Bully and Freshly Read Books spin a wheel and pick a prompt for that month, and you have to pick 12 books at the start of the year and then follow the prompts throughout the year. If you haven't started this one already, it's not too late. Just pick 11 books and watch their February prompt. Those are the major readathons that I follow that I can think of at the moment. If I have more to add, maybe I'll add them in a future video. But getting on to my November and December readathons from 2022. I was participating in the last few months of TBR Tackle. In November, I read Vampires Never Get Old, Tales with a Fresh Bite, which is a collection of YA vampire stories. It was also nonfiction November, so I read books like Underfoot in Show Business by Helene Hanff, A History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt, Cape May Ghost Stories, which are true ghost stories about Cape May, New Jersey, and Bill Bryson's African Diaries. I also read the African Diaries for the Bloomin' Readathon, and I also read another nonfiction children's book, the 1913 Patterson Silk Strikes, for the Bloomin' Readathon, as well as nonfiction November. I think I read 2 other books for the Bloomin' Readathon. One was Seed Folks by Paul Fleischman, and one was Here by Richard McGuire, which was a graphic novel. I also participated in Novella November in November 2022, and I read Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark, Revenge by Yoko Ogawa, Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, My Mortal Enemy by Willa Cather, Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, and probably some of those other ones fit in there too, but I can't remember. And I participated in Skoden. Vampires Never Get Old does have a Rebecca Rowanhorse story in it, who is an Indigenous author, and I also read Monkey Beach by Eden Robinson, who is a Canadian Indigenous author. Moving on to December, I read my TBR Tackle book, the last TBR Tackle book of all time, which was What Are You Going Through by Sigrid Nunez. I participated in the Christie's Missing Readathon and Cloak and Dagger Christmas, and the books that I read were so many and so varied, and they kind of fit into a bunch of prompts, so I'm just going to list out a ton of them. One was The Secret Adversary by Agatha Christie. I read The Christie Affair by Nina de Gramont. I read Sleep No More by P.D. James, which is a collection of 6 murderous tales. I read Cat About Town by Kate Conti. This was a cat cozy mystery that I read for the readathons, but also for a upcoming cat cozy mystery vlog. I read my second Dorothy L. Sayers book, The Unpleasantness at the Bellona Club, and I read another P.D. James, her nonfiction true crime, The Mall and the Pear Tree. The last book that I needed to complete the Buzzword Readathon in 2022 was Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Reese. So those were all the books that I read for November and December readathons. In the future, I will be like holding up the books and going more specifically over the prompts that I did, but because it's already been so long since I read those books, I'm not going to do that in this case. Let me know what your favorite readathon, especially if it's a month-long readathon. Those are the ones I like to participate in the most, but let me know what your favorite readathon is, one that's reoccurring or one that happened and you wish would happen again. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!